good day, everybody. Welcome back to our Working Together Q&A with Rabbi Karmi Ingber out of Atlanta, Georgia. We're joined in the Netiv Zoom room out of Houston, Texas, with Rod Bryant and Dennis Humphreys and a bunch of other people involved with Netiv and whoever's got the link to the Zoom room. And I know I've invited many people and shared it with our class this morning, so we never know. We might get some extra people in the Zoom. So let's just jump right in and see how Rod is doing and get into our Q&A with Rabbi Ingber. Hopefully everybody's got some wonderful questions.
Yeah, we're having some really good comments about the Q&A, and it's good to see Ryan in the group, William, Larry, Tar, Dennis, of course, was mentioned earlier. Dan had mentioned them. Atalo's coming into the room. So I really appreciate seeing you guys. It means a lot having you to join us. There'll be more that join us as we go along. It's very beneficial how we've done the Q&A sessions over time. And it's sort of a Q&A slash Devar. You know, Rabbi gives a Devar, speaks to us about a subject matter, or opens up the floor, and both of them are very effective in our learning. I know that, like I said, this week I had somebody tell me how much they've learned just from that. So it's been really good.
Well, Rabbi Ingber, how are you doing today? Always a joy to be with you. And I've tried to get people to drum up questions. So if anybody out there on the Noahide World Center social media or my Noahide Society of Canada page has a question for the rabbi, type it in the chat box. I will get it in front of Rabbi Ingber. I am so thankful that he spends some of his busy time with us to answer questions. And so if you've got some questions, now's the time to fire them forward and we'll get them before Rabbi Ingber. Rabbi Ingber, how are you doing today?
Thank God, Baruch Hashem, doing wonderful.
Baruch Hashem.
Started the new month of Nisan, month of miracles, and I can already feel the freedom in the air. So that's good for us. That's good. So what I want to do, I'm going to start talking about an idea that I think is just so important now in the world. And then I just said, I'm opening up the questions a lot more because it's really, you know, one of the challenges of speaking on the greatness of, like everything in the world. It's a verse in Koheles. It says, Zelu masdeh as Elokim. God created everything parallel. So when you have something in the good, the potential for evil is there also. It has to be, otherwise we don't have free will. The balance of things means that there's something you can use for good. The potential is you can use them not good also, and then our free will take it for the good, God willing. So the internet, as we know, unfortunately has been a vehicle for very, very bad things on the whole. On the whole, it's been, but it's been created. It's been in the world. And it's going to be used for good things. And when the Mashiach comes, we're going to know about it in 2 minutes. And we can teach Torah around the world. I've been getting, questions from people all over. Also, I just send out some responses. Sometimes it takes me a little while to get a response. I just sent something. Hopefully you got it. And some other people that I've answered. It takes me a little time sometimes. But great, we could teach Torah around the world. So that is the awesomeness of the power now to teach Torah to the four corners of the earth. Unfortunately, this has been used for very, very bad things, and we got to use it for good things. Now, because when you're speaking live to people, you can get a sense of where they're at. So that's why even though we're doing it on computer, I really want to hear everyone. I want to understand where you're at to be able to make this for people, because that's the principle. As I mentioned last week, God is always giving to us. We don't realize that. The problem is not from Hashem's perspective. He's giving. It's, do we have a vessel to receive it or not? So it's always opening up our vessel to be able to receive more of the wisdom, more of the knowledge. And that's why everything has to be appropriately given to our development. So that's why I want to hear everyone's comments and ideas so I could tailor it to what you need and hopefully communicate in that way. I want to start with something I got to talk about, because the world is absolutely insane. And so you have to realize you're in a very important position right now to do something about it. I want to explain some things that I don't want to get into politics. I don't care about politics, but the things that are going against truth, we need to stand up. was mentioned, Sandy mentioned, some other people mentioned last week about, there's 7 Nochide commandments, but there are a lot of corollaries. As Rod said, they are called, Rosh Prok, and they're called categories. That a lot of things come out from there, and there are a lot of subcategories, and there's 7 main categories. Now, one of the things you notice, though, when you talk about the 7 Noachide laws as categories, they're almost all in the negative. Don't do this, don't do that. The commandment to set up courts is in the positive. But most of the commandments that we talk about as categories are what's called lo taseh, don't do. Now, I want to explain the difference between don't do and to do, which in Judaism called positive and negative commandments. Explain that idea a little bit, because there's a big difference between things you shouldn't do and things you do. Things you do, you're adding qualities, you're bringing more holiness into the world, you're improving things. In Judaism, there are 613 commandments, 248 positive, 365 negative. 248 positive parallel to 248
recording in progress,
or central organs in the body. It's doing things positive. 365 is lined up with the sinews, the muscular systems that hold the body together. What else is 365? 365 days of the year. Why is that? Because when you have sinews and muscular system that holds the body together, if you break one of them, the whole thing falls apart. 365 days of the year means that's a system. If you break it, the thing falls apart. Negative commandments, when we transgress a negative, the system that's being held together disintegrates. So positive commandments are very good because you're adding and you're expanding and you're making yourself holier and greater and better. But when you go over a negative, what you're doing is you're destroying a system that's being held in place, like the muscular system of your body or the days of the year. And therefore, it's so serious to transgress a negative because you're destroying the system. The 7 Noachide commandments, first 6 are focused on what you can't do, because if we transgress any of those, we're destroying the world, literally. Okay? The world cannot function. People commit murder, then the world, it's not human anymore. The 6 that we're talking about, when society transgresses that, they break the entire system. And therefore, the 7th commandment in the Noachide system is to make sure you set up courts to ensure that nobody destroys the system. Okay? Now, based on that, I want to go back in history, because there were societies that were destroyed. We know in the Torah, societies that God said, these can't function anymore. For example, the generation of the flood, the generation of the people of Sodom. In the text, they were destroyed. And today, we don't know. We see something gets destroyed. We don't know what the cause always is. But when the Torah tells us, we understand. So what did they do that was so heinous that it had to be destroyed? So they crossed certain lines. That once they crossed these lines, they weren't a society anymore. Let's talk about the generation of the flood. What did they do? What was their major sin? The major sin was illicit relations, meaning there are boundaries you must keep to keep a system alive. You break those boundaries, the system falls apart. They were having illicit sexual relations with everything and everyone without any parameters, without the proper boundaries that keep the society and people righteous. And therefore, they couldn't function any longer. There was no boundaries. They broke the boundaries. The thing fell apart. The sages say, it says in the verse, their final sin was stealing. because then they couldn't even relate to one another. The boundaries were just gone between people and having, intimate relations with things they shouldn't and people they shouldn't. And then they would steal from each other, means they couldn't even care about each other in any way. So the thing had to go. They crossed boundaries that held the system together. Let me give one other example, and you'll see where I'm going, because I think with the news, you kind of figure out where I'm going. But then we talk about, let's say, the generation of Sodom. What was the final, the final tilting point in the generation of Sodom? So it says, the verse says, Akasa, the scream that came out, there was a scream that came out of Sodom. And God said, we're going to judge now based on the scream. What was the scream? So it says that there was a girl, the Midrashim say it was actually Lot's daughter, who gave charity, helped feed a poor person. And they felt this was so bad that they took the girl, they took her clothes off, they tied her up and put honey all over her body until bees stung her until she died. That was like the final straw. Now what happened? I want you to think a minute. We know we say people are like, oh, you're a sodomite, they're so evil. But every evil person believes they're doing something good. The Nazis thought they were doing something good. They said, we're getting rid of the vermin, right? We have this idea of the Ubermensch, the Superman. Their philosopher was Nietzsche, and the belief that, we have to go and help the downtrodden. We have to. So they had a philosophy. They thought they were doing a great thing. So what were the Sodomites thinking? Like, why were they doing this? And I'm going to give you 3 reasons. I mean, the Talmud says the third one is the main one, but I just want to give you to think about it a second. A rationalization. Why would a society not let poor people be taken care of? Well, I could think of a lot of reasons. You are what you're doing is you're making them codependent, which there's some truth to, right? If you're gonna say to somebody, hey, I'm gonna give you free money, you don't need to work, so why would I work? So they probably created this, I don't know if you ever read, but years ago I read some book called Ayn Rand, people pronounce it. I read a book called The Fountainhead and the Atlas Shrugged. And she made some ideas of chesed, but she had a very kindness, but she had a certain idea that people should be able to earn something and make something of themselves. So I could see the people of Sodom saying, we're very righteous people. We don't want to feed the poor because then we're enabling them, which was wrong. So they took a foundation of the way the world was built and they broke that boundary. And they said, chesed, kindness, doesn't exist. Or maybe, and this is what the Talmud says they did say, I don't know, those of you who've been to Southern California, most beautiful, it's such a beautiful place, weather is perfect, and Sodom was like that. And they said, we don't want to let people come in here. Place be full of homeless people. That's what's happening in Southern California. But that's what's happening. So we have to protect our own interests. Can't help the poor. But what they did was they broke the barrier, the boundaries that the way the world is, they destroyed those boundaries by removing kindness, and therefore they couldn't function. So when they killed this girl because she gave kindness, it said that, and they had a philosophy why that's okay to remove kindness. I have a whole philosophy for it. They already now went against the structure of the world. So I don't know, and I don't want to do what's called be pischon peh. I don't want to open up judgment and negative things towards anything in the world. But I tell you this because you need to understand this. If a generation is destroyed because they break the boundaries of what is kindness and not kindness, or what is mine and what is yours, what's going on in the world today? I want to share with you, and I want to understand this. There's certain boundaries the way the world is. It says in the Torah, Hashem made everything zochar and nekeva boram. Hashem made everything male and female. I can't think really of a greater aberration and destruction of the boundaries of the way the world is than destroying what is male and what is female. And I got to tell you, if the world has come to that, and I don't get into the politics of it, but if a judge is not going to know what's a male and a female, we got a problem in the country, in America, a major problem, and in the world. Because why? Because there are boundaries of things that's the way it is. God made the world male and female, and you have to understand what that is. And this is part of the foolishness of people. Yeah, who's better, the man, the woman? That's silliness. In Torah world, there was never a problem of a women's movement because they were never subjugated and treated poorly in the way they were in the secular world. That's true. There was never a need for that. They were always honored and treated in a way where it was not men were better, women are better. That's all nonsense. It's a male, female, and when the couple gets together, they are one person. Everything is male, female means there's the side of the giver, what's called the mashpia, and the receiver, and they have to become one. And when the husband wants to bring the wife flowers or give the wife a present, if the wife says, "Oh, thanks for the present, I don't care about you," then what happens essentially is there's no unity. When the wife says, "Oh, I love getting the present because it means that you care about me," that's called receiving, which is giving. It unifies them as male, female, and they become whole. When you don't know if there's male or female, you got a massive problem. I don't know. When I think about Sodom, and I think about all of the generations that crossed boundaries that could not be crossed. Not knowing if you're a male or a female is as great, if not greater. Now, I want to explain something else, and this is what comes out in the sort of politics of the world. People then jump on the idea of hatred and this and that, and that's not what I'm talking about. Honestly, a person who doesn't know if they're male or female it's very sad, very, very sad. I can't think of anything sadder. How you relate and we're not saying no. It's a sickness, it's a problem. It's a problem. It's a major problem. And so I'm not saying now how to act towards them. America has been very funny because America was created with the idea, and it's fascinating because there was so much religious persecution in Europe. They said, okay, I'm going to come to America and we can do what we want. They never imagined that doing what you want means that no longer the founding fathers of America never imagined that there would be no boundaries at all. They just thought, okay, you could believe in this God in this way. I'm not going to force you not, and I'll force you not. They never understood that there would be Disney. Hollywood and Disney have taken over the minds of the American people. I mean, it's unbelievable. The fantasy land of Hollywood and Disney is now reality. Whatever is real is no longer real. Now, when does this become a major problem? The Talmud says there are certain things that signify the end of a society. It lists 3 things that signify the end of a society. Now, one of them, fascinatingly enough, is not, and this is why in America, and I'm not saying this in terms of the 7 Noahide laws because you have to stop it, but in America, there was a big turning point when same-sex marriage was allowed. Because the Talmud says when the society condones, it's not what individuals do as much, but when the society says this, something that doesn't go is the reality, like the people in Sodom when they said, okay, helping the downtrodden is a bad thing, that became the concept and the law. That's a different level than what individuals do. America, yes, was set up that people will do what they do. But once the society comes along and says, this is accepted as the norm, you go into a new level now. And what happened, those who follow what happened in Disney, whatever, I don't know, somebody came out and said something and they found them on tape. To me, it wasn't anything new. I didn't even, because I look around at America and I see a massive brainwashing effort that's happening. And that's the problem. The problem is one problem is individuals do what individuals do. Okay, this is America. I love them, I want to help them, I want to talk to them, I'll try to explain to them, I'll try to help them. And sometimes it's very hard, sad situations. But when there is an attempt to tell the society that up is down and male is female, and there is no reality anymore because we're in Disneyland, that's crossing boundaries in the world that are very sanctified. And that's where the seventh Noahide law is saying, we need courts that say, no, boundaries are boundaries. Again, I think even dealing within the system of, what America was supposed to be, I'm not saying it's the ideal in terms of the society, it opened up in the beginning, and it had to create a system that people can escape persecution and come and do what they want to do. But this is not just doing what they want to do. There is a massive attempt to make everyone believe that there are no boundaries in the world. That is what I talked about, the 7 Noahide laws. The 6 are to know the proper limitations and boundaries. And the 7th is then that the society has to go and to enforce that it doesn't become legal and the norm, as in Sodom, that what is opposite of truth and right is now on the books. And that's the way you're supposed to see the world. So you're all in a very, very powerful position to an obligation, really. And honestly, in a certain way, I see more your obligation than my obligation. My family lives in Israel. I'm Israeli and I'm American. I came to America to help people, this and that. But a Jew's country is really Israel. In the bottom line, we love America. We have tremendous thanks for. And the great Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, blessed memory, and in all of his responses, he called America the country of kindness. He died many years ago. America's changed a lot, but that's what he called it, country of kindness, because he did a lot of kindness. So a lot of gratitude. But as people, wherever country you're in, you need to look around at your country and say, wait a minute, what beliefs are being pushed? The male-female dimension is extremely beautiful, and it's the idea of wholeness. It's the idea of I can become one, and therefore to go and to say this is man's better, woman's better, and all these different agendas is complete foolishness. God made us in certain ways, and those ways are beautiful and special for each one of us. And when we do our part, we become whole. I'll just end with this one thing and I'll open to questions. There is a commandment, and this probably would actually, I have to look at the extents to Noahides because it would make sense, the logical commandment in a certain way. There's a commandment called Kilayim. Kilayim is crossbreeding. There's a little bit of an issue with that, okay? What is one of the issues is that God created systems. So he created, apricots, and he created, so an apricot's an apricot, and a peach is a peach, and to blur the lines is in certain cases is problematic, because you're saying, oh, God didn't make everything we need in the world. There needs to be something else that's not there, and now the apricot's not an apricot, and a peach's not a peach. And that has to be understood in terms of male, female, are realities of the world. And again, I'm not, I know, politics, and my name will be up on this website. Now, I'm not, God forbid, espousing any hatred or any dislike, just compassion for people. But once we allow people to tell our minds what's something is not, we're in a lot of trouble, because we've broken the boundaries that keep the world together and create this beautiful system that male female can unite and create a child and be godly in that way, because they become whole. And now we don't know what's whole anymore, because we don't know what anything is. That's something that is worth standing up and being counted, and you having a big voice to stand for that. Wow. That's my thought. I'd like to share, and I'm opening up to questions on that and anything.
Well, Rabbi, I got a couple questions on YouTube. Kat is asking, well, what happens when the courts become boundless? Do we all become like Disney Vision? Is that what you're implying here?
Say again, what was the question? What
happens when the courts become boundless? Or become Disney Vision? What happens when the courts are doing it this way? You're saying the society's on the decay, right? It's like rust on a car. It's eventually going to disintegrate.
It's a major problem, because what's happening is, and I'm glad you asked this question, Kat, because there's two stages to this process, and that you got to see the two stages. If you miss the two stages, you get caught. The first stage is called blurring the line. The first stage starts in the mind, okay? And we're about a number of years into that already. And that's why a younger person who's grown up on certain beliefs
knows nothing else,
doesn't know anything else. So the first problem is the blurring of the boundaries. Who said? Who said this? Who said that? So once those, and that's why, this is like, it's really an assault. It's abuse to go and to talk to a kindergartner about these things of like ideas that
you're pulling the rug out from under them, aren't you?
Child abuse. It's simply what it is. But the point is that the first step is blurring the lines, and with social media and everything else, that is in full swing. That ship already sailed. And that's what I was referring to, Kat. That ship's already sailed. And that's why we have to talk and try to educate. But we got a big problem, because we have young people who you're watching everything, and that's social media is so powerful that these are blurbs of what's true, and you're seeing them, and you're ostracized if you don't say what everyone else is saying, so you just believe it. So the first line is the problem of blurring the lines. That's called in the heart. The head, the head is the beginning process. From the head, it goes down into the emotional level, and then to the action level. So it's in the head right now. And therefore, that's why it will move from the head into the courts and become mainstream at a certain point, unless people stand up and say, we don't allow this as our country to accept this. What can we do? I mean, it's very hard. What you can do is educate ourselves, talk to our kids, talk to people. Again, don't fall into the trap of being called a hate monger. That's the ultimate trap, because you get angry. You're like, what are you saying? You see, you're against. I'm not against anyone. I'm not against anyone. I want the whole world to know there's one God. He loves us, and he wants the best for us, and that's what I want. I don't want anyone to be on the negative side of anything. Let everyone get their act together. But we can't go and allow ideas to fester like that. So we have to talk about it. You have to also pray. You have to dive into Hashem and say, I'm doing my part. Help my country, whatever country you're in. Help the people. Let me help the people around me. Pray for your environment. I thought about Sodom. Abraham prayed for Sodom. Do you ever think about this a second? Abraham prayed for God to save the city of Sodom. They were the worst people in the world. What kind of prayer is that? What was he doing? What was Abraham praying? If you read in the verse, he said, if there's 50 people, it's 10 and 5 cities, and then 45 and 40. And then he comes down, there's 10. he's praying to save the entire city of terrible, terrible people. Why isn't he saying just wipe them out? And the answer is Abraham wasn't praying for the bad. He was praying that the good inside the city could wake up the entire city. That's why he prayed for the 10 people in the city. Because if there's 10 people in the city that have their act together and know what's true, then they can affect the others. Abraham wasn't praying, leave the terrible people, leave the killers and the barbarians, leave them around, let them continue with doing what they're doing. That's what wasn't what his prayer was. His prayer was, God, if there's 10 people in the city, then there's still goodness there that could be brought out. That's what you have to do. So pray that you could affect your city. Once it gets into the minds of the young people, once it gets into the courts, once it gets to that, there can become a point where there may be a point of no return for certain countries. And the world is going on that path. Now, again, what'll happen? No, the world's not going to get destroyed. It's not going to blow up in 5 years. It's not going to, that's not what's happening. There could be serious processes of how things come about. In the end, the world will come to its perfection. But we want to avoid all that negative things and be.
Rabbi, that leads to another question I've got here from Stephen. He says, can the rabbi speak on the conflict between the U.S. Constitution, primarily the First Amendment, and the Noahide laws? And then I asked him specifically what conflict, and he said the difference between freedom of religion versus no idolatry, or freedom of speech versus no blasphemy. How does Noahides cope with freedom of religion?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. I'm not a legal scholar, and that's what I said, Stephen, when I was kind of in the beginning. I was saying America is interesting how America did what it did, because America did not come as a Noahide country. That wasn't the process. They were escaping persecution and they wanted the freedom of religion. Now, there was a certain problem that may have been built into the Constitution in the beginning, which may be coming out now, which is once we said, the founding fathers of America, I think if they would, they wanted to say you could have any religion you want. Would they have believed that the religion was no religion? Would they have ever thought that anarchy and there is no boundaries? Would they ever think that? I don't think they would ever even imagined the world would be at the place it is today. But you're right. It is a problem in the Constitution that the Constitution of America does not set up a system as a Noahide nation. It does not. And when Mashiach comes, then it will. Till that, it's not going to do that. But what America has to do to fight to retain its status as a nation that could be a righteous nation is that they have to go, and if individuals will keep the Noahide laws and the parameters of the society will be such that will have certain definitions, then the society itself, even though the Constitution allows and has to allow it, that's the way it was built, it could still be a righteous society. Let me explain a little bit deeper what I'm saying, Stephen, because you say it's a great question. And this really came to the Supreme Court discussion that's right now in the confirmation hearings. You see, words define things. So when I use a word and you use a word, if you understand the word completely differently than I do, the whole context is different, right? If I call, for example, if I call a male something and a female something else, so now the whole discussion is different. So whenever you play with terms of what we understand we're referring to, you're changing the whole discussion. So the answer to your question, Stephen, is the Constitution of America is not a Noahide document. It allows people to be idolatrous. They could be doing. They have certain parameters in the Bill of Rights not to encroach on other people. until now, it allowed people on the whole to maintain a society where a person could be a Noachide and eventually most of society could be righteous people. In the direction it's moving now, that will be increasingly difficult because your ideas of right and wrong will be called evil. You realize that if we keep going in this path, then just like in Sodom, kindness was considered to be a bad thing, the beliefs that you would express would now be contradictory. So the answer is the Constitution does not create a Noachide format, and that's in times of Mashiach, then America will be a Noachide format. Right now, individuals can function within the righteous dynamic because the Constitution, as it's written, gives enough leeway and enough parameters that person wants to do the right thing, they can. And now there is an additional attack on certain assumptions of the constitutions because people are using words in different ways and concepts in different ways than has ever been dreamed. And now there's an assault on basic understandings of society that are fundamental to the Noachide system. And by the way, that's true. I mean, abortion is a major problem. Is abortion murder? I'm not getting to the top of abortion now, but on the whole, there's a big problem there, obviously. So if abortion is
part of the erosion.
Yeah,
it's visible erosion for sure.
We got a lot of problems there that are continuing down the path here, and so that's the answer to the question.
I got one more on YouTube, Rabbi. Lara in Tampa is asking, in Genesis 1:24, is the snake considered one of the creeping things? It seems that the snake is not included in the creation.
I think what you mean is the creeping things. I think you mean that there are we'll call it Shmona Shvatzim, the 8 reptiles or creeping
insects
that when they die, you touch them at a certain level of tumah. No, the snake is not one of the 8. The snake is a very fascinating issue. It's a very fascinating issue because the serpent, what we call it, different form before the punishment of the snake, to the point where it says that it was the greatest assistant that man had. What did it look like? What was it in that reality? It's another discussion because a lot of possibilities of what exactly it was, but it wasn't what it is now. So the snake really, in a certain sense, became a vehicle for negativity. Now, will it return? So there are certain things that, have become the epitome of the negative, and the way that they are fixed up in a rectified world is very unique. We talked about Moloch a couple of weeks ago. The snake is in the serpent of what it is in its root is a problem of something that had high potential. That when you have a high potential, you could fall into very deep negative. That was a snake. That's really, like I mentioned a few weeks ago, a Molech. A Molech was from Esav, and Esav was the son of Yitzchak. And they could have connected to the Jewish people, but they made their mission to be anti. And therefore, how they're brought back and what form they're brought back and how the world, when it's rectified, the things that are negative are still brought in the system. That's a very particular and complicated question. So the answer to your question is that the snake is not one of the 8 creeping things that you have extra tumah for. Snake has its own parameters, and its parameters is that the snake, it says, the snake is compared to a person who speaks lashon hara, evil, because they say to the snake, snake apparently when they eat stuff, it tastes like dirt to it. It eats dirt. So the snake, when it bites people, it doesn't get any pleasure out of it. So that's compared to someone who speaks badly. Like, what'd you gain out of it? A person was overcome with desire and they did a certain sin very bad, but they did it for their pleasure. When you just speak badly about people, you knock people down, you're not getting any direct pleasure. The snake itself became a vehicle to do negative things, and therefore was not in the category of doing it for its own pleasure. That's a different level of evil. Let me just explain one more point here. Every nation in the world, and this is very fascinating. You take white light and you run it through a prism, you'll see the 7 colors of the rainbow, whatever how many colors there exactly. You'll see the spectrum of colors. So in the Hebrew language is considered like the white light. It contains all the colors. The specific colors are, let's see, different languages in different societies. So different societies have qualities that have to be brought into the system. And if you travel in the world, go to different places, you see, I always said America, and I had not found the Torah source per se. This is my own thinking. I thought America had a quality of idealism that I thought was a very noble character. But every society, whatever society you're in, I'm not, Italo, you're in Peru, is that where you are now?
Yes, I'm in Peru.
My daughter's there right now.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell her to swing by, yeah.
Oh, that's great. In Lima?
No, they went to the, what's
Machu Picchu?
They're coming from Israel to, coming for Passover home, so they stop, or no, stop there. But every country, I haven't been to Peru, I hope I can get there someday. Every country has its unique flavor and its unique quality. Because it can be brought into the system. When something whole goal is to destroy, that's a different quality. That's a bad thing. That's a Molech. That's the serpent. The serpent's in its own category because it chose the path of I got to destroy something, and you see that sometimes in people. Sometimes people like they what bothers them is someone else something good they have to destroy. So the snake is not one of the 8 categories. It's a separate category, and it has its own problems and its own path. Pleasure. Okay, open up to some more questions, ideas, either about my rant about society, which I felt I had to do, because you guys are in the role there, in the position that you gotta stand up and say no.
Rabbi, you had suggested, and Atala, I'll get right to you. You had suggested, what can we possibly do in our society when there seems to be this real vocal minority that is trying to push this agenda. And I feel one of our responsibilities as the B'nai Noach, and also as our rabbis and teachers that teach, is to help transmit this message that when we begin to blur the roles of male and female, we're also inducing a negative spirituality, a spiritual technology that affects society. This is, it's not that we want to force you to do something or be something you don't think that you are. But when we start saying that good is bad and bad is good, and male is female and female is male, we've begun to mute down the power of individuality, distinction, holiness, and goodness in the world. What brings down goodness in the world is everybody realizing their distinction. And we're coming to a place in society where, there's no distinction amongst anybody. You can be whatever you want. And it's scary, but I think we do have a role. And that is to help people understand we're not against anybody. But clearly, do you realize how many people that are in that role that consider themselves, binary, they don't have a gender, whatever. Many of these people deal with very serious mental health issues. And it's proven, it's proven.
Of course.
Because they don't even know their identity, and that's a horrible situation to be in. Go ahead.
very painful, very difficult.
Mhm.
But the bigger problem is not that small minority who need help. It's the agenda. And there is an agenda. Don't be fooled. There is an agenda because the agenda takes it, and that's why. Look, it's very much connected. Like the idea of communism. Communism is always very closely connected with atheism. It always was. It was one of the founding principles that we don't accept the way God made the world. We're the ones who are going to make the world the way it should be. Of course, it meant the guy who was in charge took all the money. But it's the same thing here also now. It's like, no, we don't accept that. We live in Disneyland. And we're going to create a new reality. So it's not even the people that have the problem that they need help. It's the people that say this is a great opportunity to allow a destruction of boundaries. So I started today because that's what it really is. Destroying boundaries has an objective. It has a goal. It means now it's a free-for-all. I can do whatever I want to do.
Atalo and then Rabbi Weissman. Atalo?
I was gonna ask, are the Democrats flushing America down the drain? But I won't ask that. Instead, I'm gonna ask that should we participate? Try to help out in the elections to choose people that have our own values.
Yeah.
Is that an important thing for us to do?
Yeah, I think it is very important. It's very important because, it's interesting because what determines the society, in many laws in the Torah, we go by majority. Majority of the world is obligated. We got a problem. Majority of the world is Zakai, is meritus. We're in good shape. So, when you have a dictatorship, so it's trickier because the dictator rises to power and maybe he's suppressing what the people really want. Maybe the people are complacent and they allow it. Theoretically, in a society, and again, democracy is not, by the way, it's a little mistake. Democracy is not a panacea. It's not a solution. In Israel, the Hamas, the terrorist organization, was voted in democratically, so to speak. I mean, what is that? So if most people vote for, an evil person, then the society is evil. It's not a solution. But the point is that we want most of the people in the society that we're living in to be righteous. So therefore, it's important to vote and to go and to say, no, I am clearly not supporting things that are against Torah, against the 7 commandments. I am supporting goodness and righteousness. And by the way, it doesn't mean that either party, politicians are politicians. I mean, I remember in Israel, this I thought was great. I just share this with you, understand this. In Israel, I lived in Israel for 20 years. And I lived in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, in the early years, it was run by, Jerusalem was becoming a more religious city. Now it's a very religious city, but it was run by a very leftist a mayor, and it was like very kind of anti-religious years ago. And then what happened was there was a religious bloc. And then there was a more, let's say, called right wing, was called Likud, which is like more, I guess, like Republican Party, whatever. And so the left was going to win again because the religious were going to vote for the religious. They weren't the majority. And the whatever would be called the parallel to the right party was going to get their votes, and left was going to win. So at the end of the election, right before the election happened, so the supposedly right-wing party made a deal with the religious and said, we'll go together and we'll make you deputy mayor and this and that. So now the rabbis had to come out and tell the people in Jerusalem what their halachic ruling was, what to vote. So they didn't want to say, they knew not to vote for the people who are against Torah, but they couldn't say vote for the ones that were the other side because they weren't right either. So they said, everyone should vote for the party that's less against the truth. And everyone knew what it meant.
I think that's funny. It's the lesser of two evils.
Everyone knew what it meant. So I'm not, politics are politics, and people have their ideas, and some guys are good at it, but do they have Torah? Do they have truth? So they have their ideas, but they're closer, and therefore, yeah, you have to go with something that's against 7 laws, it's against Torah. You cannot be party to it, and you stand and be counted.
Rabbi Ingber, I'm introduced you to Rabbi Weissman. He had a heart attack a couple of weeks ago and is still recovering with stents. And he's our Tuesday night teacher. And I just want to introduce
Hi, Rabbi
Weissman.
Shalom.
Nice to see you. Hope you're feeling better.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Where are you
getting there.
We're
getting there. I am upstate New York.
Upstate New York.
Ellenville, New York. It's in the Catskills.
Sure.
Got a house up there.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right.
So I wanted to not going to address Rod when I'm coming back yet. Maybe a little later. But I wanted to stick to the subject right now. I wanted to make a comment, Rabbi, in relation to just really something practical that we can learn from this whole national crisis, I guess. And that is that if you look at the development of these changes, and even as they are today, there's this idea of tolerance that runs through it. There's certainly at the beginnings of the legal battle in support of different lifestyles. Those who were promoting it were pushing it using arguments based on compassion, having compassion and trying to be understanding of different people who have problems. In fact, you can even say that they use the deviancy in order to say, yeah, these people are very different than most, and therefore most people they're alienated from most people, and they deserve our compassion.
Right.
And they deserve our. Then they take it, and then it goes further. It's not just our compassion, but they deserve our recognition, and they deserve in terms of, again, this is really only about, I'm talking about conduct, but their particular conduct in this regard is deserving of full equal recognition as normative heterosexual conduct. And I think we learned an interesting lesson, which is classically discussed by the sages, of how the evil inclination operates.
Yep.
And that is that it comes with something kosher. It tells us, it comes to us with often using actually good character traits to say, this is something good, or we should, meaning to say, in this case, coming with compassion.
Right.
It could be a situation in which, and this is a very, very complex question about compassion on people who are transgressing Torah, and how does one go about navigating that. On the one hand, there's the element of having compassion, reaching out, and to love all people, and to bring them closer to Torah. I mean, you can argue, how can you bring people closer if you don't have compassion on them? So on the other hand, the other question is how do we make sure that we keep our distance and are not influenced, and that we don't accept their behavior, which is not acceptable according to Torah, as acceptable and normative, and we shouldn't become comfortable with it. So it's quite a nuanced, situation, and I think it flows over into in many other situations. But obviously, it's very important for the Noahide community, because obviously, if so many different people have different relationships with, let's say, people who are in different forms of idolatry or have views that are very hostile to Torah views, and how do you navigate those relationships? As on the one hand, reaching out and showing love and unconditional caring for the person as in being in the image of God. Yeah, at the same time, making sure that there's absolute clarity that their actions are wrong and not to learn from those actions of those people. I kind of just spelled it out. I mean, that's basically what it is. It's nuanced in that you, one hand, recognize them as a holy soul, as being in the image of God, but in terms of their particular behaviors, one or two of them or whatever that are particularly problematic, you know, you make sure that it's very clear that you stay far away from that and don't lose focus that that's something that you don't want to learn from.
Well put. I think it's a very good point. We just add a couple points. Very, very well put. I mean, like you even see, and this is the amazing thing, because the ideas that they're using of compassion are Jewish ideas. People don't realize. I mean, you know, American society, the Romans, the Greeks, if the baby was born with a defect, they killed the baby. It wasn't a society that was helping the downtrodden. So these are Jewish concepts to help the downtrodden, those are Torah concepts, and the Torah is the place where it is found in the beginning. So these like all lies have to have an element of truth. And so that is the element of truth, is compassion. I agree, it's a very good point. That's what happens. They're using the compassion. That's why I said don't get into the thing of I'm missing that. I have compassion for everyone, but we can't say it's right. And just to add to also what Rabbi Weissman was saying, also I mentioned this once before, and I saw this very clearly because I lived in Israel for 20 years. When I came back to America, I didn't recognize it at first. And one thing that I saw that was clearly different was when I grew up, the idea was tolerance. I mentioned this many times, but it's an important point. Tolerance, as defined by the philosopher John Stuart Mills, means I tolerate you. I think you're wrong, 100% wrong, but I won't violently force you to change what you believe. That's I tolerate. I don't agree with you. Tolerance moved into what's called relativism at some point in America, I guess in the 90s. So tolerance wasn't working so well. And so instead of saying, I think you're wrong and I tolerate you, you're not allowed to think someone is wrong because then you are closed-minded. So now it became relativism. There is no truth. Everything's relative. That was a big shift in America. You can't say something is wrong. Then you're racist, you're closed-minded. That's not true. And that's the split that Rabbi Weissman is saying. I 100% agree. I love you. I want to help you. I think you're dead wrong. And to say it in that way, to say, listen, because they need to hear the contrast, because it's already been brainwashed that when you say I'm wrong, you're saying, therefore, you're saying you want to kill me and destroy me and I'm terrible, blah, 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 blah. That's already the mantra. So shift it. I love you. There's so many good things, but I believe that you're completely wrong. I'm not going to force you to change your opinion, but that's an important split. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good. Other questions, ideas, comments? It's very tricky. I get questions all the time, particular legal questions. People ask me about this, and you don't need to go and to make your statement in work, but sometimes there are problems when they may force you to do something that is condoning something that's not true. If you get that thing, send me the question, Rabbi Ingber, gmail.com. I'll try to answer a particular case. I get that a lot, where people have situations, they're like, you don't have any obligation to go and to, in your job where you're unfortunately under the control of the people who are paying you. You don't have to go and make your protest at that part. But there is a question about, like, how far is the line? If you know the story of the prophet Elisha, where Naaman comes to him and he says, "What am I going to do? The king forces me to do this and forces me to bow." And sometimes you're in a situation you have to. There are things you need to make a stand on, say no. There are times you don't have to come out. But yes, this is a problem as the society keeps pushing things that become counter to reality, and they push it. The job situation is going to get harder and harder. So my overall first advice is you don't need to make a stand when you don't need to. But if you are getting forced into something, then send me a particular question, because sometimes you have to. We have certain laws. I mean, there's laws where a person, if someone says kill someone or be killed, you're supposed to say kill me, because to kill someone else, I have lost my humanity. I'm not a person anymore. And therefore, I can't go and do that. So there are lines that, I'm not saying you have to give up your job and make a statement on every single point. Is not the hill to die on. You don't have to go out and say it. But if they're forcing you to do something, there's smart ways to do it. I wouldn't tell you first thing is to fight. The smart way to do it is to flip it around, saying, like, I think this is a persecution of my personal belief here. I think we have an issue. I'm part of this minority of belief. You could switch it on them also, because their thing is totally logical. I mean, this is a game I like to play with a relativist. A relativist says, everyone you think is true for you. So I say, okay, thank you very much. You know what I think? This is what I think. I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah. She's now said about if she doesn't want to share the woman's bathroom with a gay male, the problem's hers, and they kind of switch it, and
this is a big problem. This is why I'm talking about today, because it's infecting everything.
Rabbi Weissman has a question too, or comment.
It's affecting everything. So, Laura, I think it's a problem, and my advice is ideally it would be best to work for people that don't have these views. Obviously, if you can't get that, then you could lay low. But if they come to a point where they're going to push you too far and want you to do something that's against what is morally correct, then you have to stand up. And this is why I'm talking about this today, because we have to foresee this. It's gonna get worse, not gonna get better. Yeah.
Another comment. I think we are in the religious camp have to take a very good look at our history and realize that we've made many mistakes. Why did religion lose its influence over young people? And how do we get it back? But I think before figuring out how to get it back, we do have to take that very hard look at ourselves and see what is a particular organized religion. And by the way, without any organization, you don't really have much power. I mean, although in Noahidism, the 7 laws is kind of individualized, but still, as we see right here, you need to function within a group and get together and have organizations and so on. So I'm just saying, what has been done? What can we improve? Let's put it this way: what has religion done that maybe needs to be done? What are the positives that we can focus on or improve on? Or what things were not done correct in the past? I could say one thing that we definitely, that is a problem that it still needs to be worked on, and that is obviously and so many people still talk about it, young people, and that's judgmentalism. And I see it in the press also today, on the right, always complaining and saying, shocked, look what the left is saying, look what they're doing and everything. It's negative. It's from a negative point of view. They're doing wrong, it's so shocking, and so on and so forth. What we often find among religious groups of many different religions, particularly similar within the Judeo-Christian camps, which is where we have, moral, where we have expectations for moral conduct. So what happens is if someone doesn't live up to it, so then the person is looked askance. The problem is simply that sometimes people with ego, they get involved in that aspect of things, and they point fingers at others, not for, maybe unwittingly, for not the right reasons, and certainly, again, not out of love. So anyway, my simple point is really to turn this around and to emphasize the positive and spread with love, and to spread with happiness and simcha. I think that's probably the main point, is how do we bring simcha and vitality into our Jewish practice, and also meaning and change. That's another issue, is that when young people feel that there are problems in the world, that the existing establishment is not doing anything about it and ignoring, and there's other voices that are saying, hey, let's do something about this, and are active. So then that could also cause, issues of a feeling of that the religious establishment is not paying attention to the needs of the generation. So anyway, I'm simply, I don't really want so much to address, maybe I've said too much already, but really just simply to focus on the positive and try to, as I said, to bring out vitality, happiness, and also to pay attention to those in need and the problems, and to address them. Just like great tzaddikim like Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik and others in that generation tried to address different problems of Jewish workers within the Jewish community, but not to forget, the people of famously Israel Salanter, the famous founder of the Muslim movement, said that before you talk to a Jew about his character, make sure he's got something to eat. So in that vein, to reach out, to put a smile on someone's face and have unconditional love for others, and try to, where you see some problem, don't look away and say it's someone else's problem and I have to go back to my holy books, but to try to do something. We're only human, we're limited, but to try to help other people while we're trying to, at the same time, make sure to continue to set times to have a relationship with Hashem. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. True. Any other time for one or two more, or are we?
Anybody else have any questions or comments that you would like to add? Now would be the time before we have to go.
I have one that's a little for somebody else.
No. Go ahead.
This is a little different topic, but when you were talking about Sodom and Gomorrah earlier, it made me think of a question that came up that I was reading in a book or commentary or something, I don't remember. I said, why did Abraham pray for Sodom and Gomorrah, but apparently did not pray when he was told to offer Isaac? And I'd never thought of that before. And I thought, well, that was kind of an interesting question. Why would he not do that?
Yeah, he did, but it's a good question. It's a very good question. It's two different purposes, two different reasons. So for Sodom, the praying for Sodom, as I said before, and there are many sources that say this, is that he's praying for the good in this situation. That's what he's praying for. He's praying there's got to be some good quality, and let that come out. The praying for Isaac, there's a lot of reasons why he did it. There's a lot of ways to say it, but the approach that I would take is that Avraham knew there's the test of the Akedah was getting to the place where I'm trusting Hashem beyond my logic. And therefore, to ask the question there was not the appropriate time. As a matter of fact, you see at the end of the story, he says, God, I could have asked you these questions. So he didn't want to go there. And I'll explain a little bit deeper why, which is a little bit connected with last week's parasha also, with when Aaron, it says when his sons died, and it says Vayidom Aaron, he was silent. There's two different levels of silence. One silence is that, let's say someone insults me. So that's called bolem piv. I want to respond, but I say, no, I'm going to hold it back. That comes from a place where I'm saying, I want to be above the way this person is acting. They're calling me this, they're calling me that. I want to be above that. I'm going to hold back. That's one level. It's a worthy level too. It's a very good level. There's something else when you realize that there's something beyond where you're at. That's why it's the law of, like, a person has a Rabbi, as a teacher, and there's a certain place where, if you can't, of course, if he's doing something wrong, but there's a certain place where it's beyond my ability to understand. And therefore, that's the word by Aaron, by Dom Aaron. Aaron was silent. I had nothing to say. He knew it was beyond, the reason was beyond whatever it is that he had. And that was the place of Avram. Avram is placed there, and it's fascinating, and I make it very practical in our world, because there are religions that talk about something called, blind faith. That's not Judaism at all. In Torah, there is logic. There's logic. This is right, this is wrong. And you use your logic to the nth degree. There's a certain place where you have to understand that God's thoughts are beyond my logic. I'll give you an example. You go to a doctor. Now, there's a certain point where the doctor, he's said this, said that, and you feel this doctor's a great doctor. Now they tell you to do something, and you don't understand all the math and all the medicine about it. But you understand through your mind, you already understood this doctor is very good. And now, since everything else they said before you understand a certain place that's beyond what you could understand in medicine. You're not a doctor. How much more so is our idea? The mind could take us to a certain place. We have to use our logic. And there's a certain place where God's thoughts are not our thoughts. And that was the place of Avram. When he knew the commandment was that God said, you followed everything. Avram is called in the Talmud called Philosopha Gadol, the great philosopher. If I said who Avram was, his whole thing was he figured out God from his own logic. He was called the great philosopher. He figured it out from his own mind. Everything he used was his logical mind. And then there was a place where he knew to be true, and he had to understand there was a place that God was telling him beyond what he could understand. That's the difference. Sodom was a different quality. Pray for the good. My job is to pray for bringing out the good in people. My wife's been said before. I pray the good, bring out the good in people. Here it's my world, and I want to put my world on understanding something. This is beyond me, and that's why Avram was silent. Something by Aaron, by the way.
Thank you. And I guess, could we add to that when we truly believe that in your example, the doctor, or take it on to Hashem, when he tells us to do something that is beyond our understanding and logic, we have to believe that that person has my ultimate good in mind, will not lead me into something wrong, which even though I don't understand it, I know it's for my good. Same with the doctor.
100%. And I want to just qualify. This is not, don't believe this idea of blind faith. That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
Using the logic, but there's a certain place whenever we talked about this last week, we talked about idolatry a little bit, there's a certain place whenever I believe that I could understand God, I'm in trouble already, because then you make yourself God. You can't. It's not possible. It's a verse. There's no way. You can't understand God in any way, shape, or form. So therefore, but yes, when God tells you to do something, it is going to be for your good. Anything that's right, anything that's true, anything that's good is never going to go backwards. It's never going to come back negative. That's what the question that Laura asked before also. I'm not saying you have to know when and where to take a stand, But when you take a stand, even though it may be difficult at the time, when you're doing the right thing because it's right, in the end, the good will come.
This has been an amazing discussion. And as always, this will stand out as something great for people to watch post-production. And Dan, I just want to remind those before you have to go, those who are watching us on Facebook and YouTube that hasn't had the opportunity to join our weekly classes or the weekly classes with the World Noahide Center, I want to encourage you to get a hold. There's plenty of learning opportunities to learn to read Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, getting some of the, I would say, the best teaching you can find for Noahides anywhere in the world is right here on Netiv and the World Noahide Center. And we're very happy to be able to do that. I want to thank the two people from the international community, Atalo in Peru and Stephen Green in the UK. Thank you so much, guys, for showing up. I mean, Stephen, we've missed you. I remind me to tell you about my disaster in doing sous vide this week. Okay, I'll talk to you later about it. I don't want to embarrass myself in public, but
where is Stephen? Where are you?
Stephen is Stephen. Recognize yourself. Open up. You're on mute. Remember, you're muted, Steve.
Good evening. Yeah, I'm. Good evening. I'm about 23 miles south of London in a small village called Canal Side in Woking. The reason I came onto the group tonight is because I finished my contract with my last employer, and I've picked up a brand new job, and I start tomorrow. So they were working me towards a heart attack. So I had to pull out, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got more time.
It should go well. This new path should go well for you.
Yeah. Better life.
Hey, Ricardo.
Yeah.
And then that's Stephen Green and Ricardo. Where are you calling from again?
Germany, right?
No, Sweden.
No, Sweden. Stockholm, Sweden.
Sweden. Yeah.
So I'm actually not too far from where Stephen's from, though. I'm actually from Slough.
Slough, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's important that everybody tries to stay in contact with each other. Ricardo, I have talked to some people, but as you said, some of the people in Sweden have moved. And so that whole community is kind of broken up right now. So in due time, we'll be able to do it. Sandy, you had something you wanted to say before we go?
Yes, just it's so good to see Rabbi Weissman today. We have
Oh, thank you so much.
You look fantastic. So I hope
we
you
have,
do as well as you look.
Really?
We have prayed for you.
I'm keeping the lights dim, so.
Yeah, well, go from strength to strength in everything you do,
thank
Rabbi.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for all your prayers and good thoughts.
Thank you. And Rabbi Ingber, thank you so much. And we look forward. Are you going to be able to do next Sunday?
Yeah,
Is Pesach going? Okay. Okay.
Off, but next Sunday we're still on.
Awesome.
All right. So we're going to sign out for now, Ron?
Yes, go for it.
All right, folks. So we're gonna sign out for now. Working together with the Netiv Center here on the Noahide World Center, social media. It's all about making connections and getting to know one another and coming together with Torah and making the world a better place. And we feel free to reach out to anybody at Netiv or myself or the Noahide World Center. And we will always try to help make connections in your area in the hopes that things begin to blossom. I know up here where I am in Canada, it's spring's just starting to hit and trees are starting to blossom. I don't know about down in Texas. You guys have probably already got trees in full bloom, no doubt, right?
No, we're still blossoming. As a matter of fact, that the reason why I didn't mention you in international communities because you're in America. We consider you one of us, and you consider us part of the same continent. So
Yeah, we sit right on top of that. But it's a
Yeah.
joy. It's always a joy to come together with like-minded people and learn something fresh and new, and more so to have those deep-seated questions answered. So, Rabbi Ingber, are we going still with Q&A for next week? Because I want to tell the audience if they
let's
have
do
some
one
questions.
more. I'll open up with Var Torah, and then on something that's relevant, and then you guys can just go wherever you
This
want.
this works. This works. We like this.
Yeah. Today was just exciting and awesome. I like the way you brought it out, and then it started to talk. I like the flesh and bones analogy you used at the beginning. A couple people came late and asked me where they were jumping into, and it turned out real well. And so, if you have some questions, write them down and be prepared to come back next week, same time, and we'll get them before the rabbi. Or you can always email. I put his email there, rabbiingber@gmail.com.
Yep, that's right.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Can I ask a question? You've got two meetings, one at 4 o'clock and one at 5 o'clock. So are you not rolling into your 5 o'clock meeting now?
No, we have a 4 o'clock. This was before we had Q&A before, but we will stay a bit after to have some discussion.
Okay, all right. I
Yes.
just see that Sunday your itinerary, you've got lots of meetings.
I'm going to sign out.
Okay, so let them sign out, and we'll stay here for a moment.
All right, folks. So we're out. We'll be back same time next Sunday. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Bye for now.
Shalom, shalom.
Um,
Okay.
Recording stopped.
So now that we are in our private group, first of all, Steve, so glad to see that you're not going to be working so hard. I know that